Well, hello. Welcome to Encounters Online service. My name is Sarah Fullerton, and we are so thankful that you've chosen to join us for worship today, whether that's right now when it's debuting, later on, maybe a couple days from now, maybe you're in your car, maybe you're in your home church watching with some friends down in Brunswick like we have there. Or maybe you're working a third shift and this is your chance to spend some time hearing a good message and responding with some worship. Wherever you are and whatever season you're in, I want you to know that you're welcome here. And I want you to know that God loves you so, so much. And we're thankful that you've chosen this place to land and receive some word and worship time. So if this is your first time here, or if you've been watching us for a while and joining us on our online service, we've got a QR code that we're going to put up on the screen right now. This is a chance for you to connect with us, but also so that we can connect you with others. It's really important that we have a community, whether that be online or in person at a physical church. We want to be able to connect you with people, whether that's the staff here or someone else that we know that can be praying for you and walk with you. So if you fill out that QR code, you can put in as much information as you want, but more importantly, we'd really love to be praying for you. And this is a chance for us to receive prayer requests. You can mark whether or not you want those to be specifically for pastor or staff here, or if you're okay with us sharing that with our prayer team. And what our prayer team does is spend some time every Monday when we send that out, praying over the requests that we've received during the week. So we would love to be praying for you. We would love to hear about what God is doing in your life, and we'd love to be walking with you in whatever season that you're in. So fill out that QR code right now, and then we're going to go into our worship portion. So basically what this is we have an abbreviated message. Our pastor, James P. Owens, is going to be delivering that, and then we've got some worship time at the end for you to respond and spend some time in prayer and reflecting over what it is that God just showed you through the message. So I'm going to stop talking, and we're going to get started. We hope you guys enjoy worship.
Greetings, friends. I'm James P. Owens, lead pastor of Encounter Church in Rincon, Georgia. Wherever you are and however you may find this online teaching, welcome, and I'm glad you're here with us today. And of course, I want to say a special word of welcome to our friends down in Brunswick, the home church. Hope you guys are doing great. I hear you're enjoying some delicious country ham today, so hope that was really good, home church folks. You know, I was thinking about the scripture for today and got to thinking about growing up with siblings. Did you have siblings growing up, brothers or sisters? And if you did you ever fight with your brother or your sister? I know my sister and I had our fair share of quarrels growing up, but my mother always told us a really funny story about the way that her and her sister would fight as kids. It was kind of one of those family legends that gets told again and again. My mother was the younger of two sisters, and they had a swing set in their yard that had a little ladder in the middle so she could climb up to the top. And one day my mother, the younger sister, climbed up to the top of the swing set and sat up there holding a toy lawnmower, like an old metal toy lawnmower. This was back many, many years ago. And she sat up there and said, "Oh, it's okay," to her big sister. You can walk under the swing set." And her sister said, "No, of course not. You're going to drop the lawnmower on me." And she said, No, I won't drop it on you." And of course, she walked under the swing set to get on a swing, and my mom dropped it right on her. Her big sister was smart enough not to go under the swing set again when my mom was sitting up there. Seems like we often fight the most with those we're closest to. And in the book of Obadiah that we're going to be looking at today, we hear about two which you might call sibling nations, or cousin nations, you might say, who were not getting along either. We're going to hear about the Edomites, a neighbor nation to Israel, who stood idly by, or stood aloof, as Obadiah puts it, while the Israelites were enduring terrible suffering at the hands of the Babylonians. And actually, to make matters worse, it turns out the Edomites did a little more than that. They not only stood by, they even kicked the Israelites while they were down, too. Makes me wonder, what ways do we stand aloof to violence and injustice, even without knowing that we might be doing it sometimes? So I want to talk a little bit about this prophet Obadiah, what was going on at his time, the time that he wrote his short little book, and who these Edomites were and what they were doing to Israel when they stood aloof, when they actually made their suffering worse by hurting the Israelites, who were already enduring great hardship at the hands of the Babylonians. So here's Obadiah. There's no chapter. It's just one chapter, so we don't use the chapter designation, just verses for Obadiah. It's one of the shortest books in the Bible, in fact. So here's Obadiah verses 1 through 15. The vision of Obadiah. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom. We have heard a message from the Lord. An envoy was sent to the nations to say, "Rise, let us go forth against her in battle. See, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you, you who live in the clefts of rocks and make your home in the heights. And who can say to yourself, 'Who will bring me down to the ground?' Though you soar like an eagle and make your nest among the stars, I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what disaster awaits you? Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? If grape pickers came to you, would they not leave a few grapes? But how Esau will be ransacked, all his hidden treasures pillaged. All your allies will force you to the border. Your friends will deceive and overpower you. Those who eat your bread will set a trap for you, and you will not detect it. In that day, declares the Lord, will I not destroy the wise men of Edom, those of understanding in the mountains of Esau? Your warriors, Teman, will be terrified, and everyone in Esau's mountains will be cut down in the slaughter, because of the violence against your brother Jacob. You will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. On that day you stood aloof, while strangers carried off his wealth, and foreigners entered his gates, and cast lots for Jerusalem. You were like one of them. You should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in that day of disaster, nor seize their wealth in that day of disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of trouble. The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. There's Obadiah verses 1 through 15. This book, this short little prophetic book, Obadiah, was written immediately following one of the absolute worst, most dark times in Israel's history. It was the big, bad catastrophe that all these prophetic books that we've been looking at have been pointing to for a long, long time, sort of been building up to. So a brief historical recap. We know that God's people Israel lived in two kingdoms during this time. The southern kingdom called Judah, because it was mostly the tribe of Judah, had its capital in Jerusalem, and the northern kingdom, which is sometimes called Israel, just because it was the rest of the tribes of Israel for the most part. First, they were under threat from Assyria. The Assyrian Empire were the bad guys for a long time. You remember Assyria from Jonah, Amos, and Hosea. They were the threat during the time those books were written. The Assyrian Empire eventually conquered the northern kingdom in 722 BC, destroying its capital Samaria and scattering the population. The southern kingdom survived for quite some time. Eventually, the Assyrian Empire collapsed. You may remember that from the book of Nahum. They were replaced by another empire bent on conquering the land as much as possible, the Babylonians. You may remember the Babylonians from Habakkuk. We met them there in that book of Habakkuk, if you'll recall. The Babylonians would go on to conquer the southern kingdom and sack its capital city, Jerusalem, the city where God's temple was. They destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and sent many of the people from there into exile. This is called the Babylonian exile. And it is the dark hour in Israel's history, the Babylonian exile. The whole of the Old Testament really revolves around this fact that God's people were in the promised land, but then they lost it to Babylon. The temple, where God's presence was supposed to dwell, destroyed, leveled to the ground, and God's people sent off into exile to live in a foreign land. They lost their land. They lost their temple. They were shaken to the core of this people. And did anyone come to help God's people when this mighty empire was conquering them? Not really. In fact, one of their nearest neighbors, a nation called Edom, did exactly the opposite. The Edomites stood aloof to the suffering of their neighbors in Judah. And worse than that, they actually gloated over the destruction of Jerusalem and even took advantage of that situation to enrich themselves in some ways. And that's what the prophet Obadiah is writing about. Following this dark time in Israel's history, it's almost like Obadiah turns to the Edomites and says, how could you do that to us? How could you leave us in our worst moment? The first several verses of Obadiah imagine armies going to war against Edom in retribution for what they had done to God's people in Jerusalem and Judah. Verses 1 and 2, we have a message from the Lord, an envoy sent to the nations to say, rise, let us go against her in battle, referring to the nation of Israel, referring to the nation of Edom. Then in verse 2, see, I will make you small among the nations, you'll be utterly despised. Then verse 3, the pride of your heart has deceived you, you who dwell in clefts of rocks. Edom was known for being a rocky, hilly country and was usually protected by its terrain. The mountainous terrain gave them a kind of protection, but Obadiah says, no, don't think that you can hide out in your mountain houses. God is still going to bring you down. It goes on like this for several verses until Obadiah finally gets right to the point and says, look, Edom, you Edomites, you're going to get yours. God will make sure that you get destroyed too, that what you did to your neighbor Israel is going to come back and bite you. Verses 8 through 10. In that day declares the Lord, will I not destroy the wise men of Edom, those of understanding in the mountains of Esau? Your warriors Teman will be terrified, and everyone in Esau's mountains will be cut down in the slaughter because of the violence against your brother, Jacob. You will be covered with shame. You'll be destroyed forever. So here we begin to see something deeper going on here, because it's something that makes Edom's crime seem all the more egregious. Did you catch that? Notice verses 8 and 9, the references to the mountains of Esau. Now the name Esau might be familiar to you if you think all the way back to the book of Genesis. You might remember Abraham had a son Isaac, and Isaac and Rebekah had two twin boys, Jacob and Esau. Jacob got a new name from God, Israel, and Jacob had 12 sons. He became the father of God's people, the Israelites, and each of his sons, the ancestor of one of the 12 tribes of Israel. But what you may not know is that Esau also became the father of a nation in his own right. And the nation which was descended from Esau is called Edom. The Edomites were descendants of Esau. Israel and Edom, their ancestors were brothers. They were like siblings. And just like Jacob and Esau didn't get along always, so too Israel and Edom fought as well. Always fighting with the ones closest to them. These sibling nations, or cousin nations, you might say, at least. That's why verse 10 says, this is all because of the violence, Edom, that you did against your brother, Jacob. And as we consider what this might mean for us today, is it not true that all too often we wind up hurting the ones that are closest to us? The very people that we ought to be looking out for the most. Sometimes those are the ones that we harm. Just like siblings who fight with each other in a sibling rivalry kind of way, their constant proximity makes the fighting more common. Sometimes we take out our fears and frustrations on those closest to us, whether our family, our closest neighbors, our fellow residents, our fellow citizens. We see this on a bigger scale too, don't we? Too often we see Christian divided against Christian, neighbor against neighbor, and at least in this country today, our very brothers and sisters with whom we ought to be united. So we know that what Edom did to Israel in the days of the Babylonian conquering was even worse because they were like brother or sister or cousin nations to one another. They should have treated them better. But what did the Edomites do that was so bad? What did they do that drew the ire of this prophet Obadiah so severely down upon them? Well, he does mention a few specific things that the Edomites did to hurt Israel in the wake of the Babylonian invasion. I think we can learn something from each of these as well. First, verse 11. As I've been saying, the Edomites stood by and did not help those in Jerusalem when the Babylonians invaded. On that day you stood aloof, while strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates. That's verse 11. At Israel's darkest hour, their neighbors, their siblings, the Edomites, did nothing to help them. So I wonder, how often do we stand aloof to the suffering of others? It's easy for us to turn a blind eye to the pain and hardship that so many people endure. At least I think it is. Now, of course, we know we can't solve every problem. One person can't help every person in the world. I wish I could. But I do think it's important not to look away. When we are confronted with poverty, with homelessness, with persons in grief, with those suffering all manner of things, it's at least a start not to look away. When we see victims of violence, we want to look away, but perhaps God is leading us in a different direction, to look upon all those who are suffering with compassion. I wonder why the Edomites stood aloof. I wonder why they didn't think, oh, let's go help our neighbors, the Israelites. Maybe they were afraid. That's certainly possible. Maybe they said, oh, the Israelites, they're just getting what they deserved. If they hadn't rebelled against the king of Babylon, they wouldn't be in this mess. Maybe the Edomites said, yep, it's the Israelites' own fault. If they had just complied with the Babylonians, they'd be fine. But God, speaking through the prophet Obadiah, says, no, that's no excuse. It's no excuse for standing aloof to the pain and suffering of others. Maybe the Edomites were thinking of their own frequent conflicts with Israel, even though these nations were cousins, or maybe especially because they fought frequently. Similarly, it's easy for us to ignore suffering when we feel like it's happening to someone else, someone that's different than us, someone that's over there, right? It was easy for many Americans to ignore the suffering of Jewish people in Europe at the beginning of World War II, just as far too many Americans are now ignoring the suffering of Palestinians in the Middle East. Do we stand aloof to the pain of others? Or will we have the courage to tremble with indignation at every injustice? But not only did Edom fail to help Israel, they actually went further. Obadiah says they were actually happy to see their neighbors suffering. Verse 12, you should not gloat over your brother in the day of his misfortune, Obadiah tells the Edomites, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. Again, maybe the Israelites were like, oh, Israel, you finally got what you deserved. Good thing those Babylonians came along to teach you a lesson. Look at how much better we are than you. You had your temple and city destroyed, and we Edomites are here doing just fine. Was this the ancient equivalent of Nana Nana Boo Boo? Either way, the Edomites rejoiced at the destruction of Israel. They took pleasure in their neighbors' misfortune. I would like to think that most of us have the self-awareness and compassion not to rejoice in the suffering of others. Yet, unfortunately, we do see this happening, don't we? You may not know this, but in this country, there's an election coming up. I know, who knew? One side will win, and one side will lose, in all likelihood. And whichever side wins and whichever side loses in the main electoral contests, there will probably be some people that will feel like it's a day of misfortune, or even a day of destruction. So if your side wins, don't rejoice in the misfortune of the other. Listen to their concerns with compassion and work to ensure that no harm is done to any person, and that all the good that we can do is done for all. In short, be a good Methodist. John Wesley's first two simple rules: do no harm, do all the good you can. The Edomites, unfortunately, did not follow Mr. Wesley's good advice. They didn't just stand aloof. They didn't just rejoice at Israel's suffering. They actually went further and did harm to their neighbors. Verse 14. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of their trouble. When Babylon invaded, they laid siege to Jerusalem. Eventually, they went in and sacked the city. So naturally, many of the Israelites fled. They tried to get out of there to save themselves. But there were some Edomites who were lying in wait, just waiting for the chance to capture these fugitives, these refugees, and hand them over to the Babylonians, presumably for some kind of reward. I guess all I can say about this is, if we ignore the sufferings of others, and if we go further and actually rejoice in the suffering of others, it won't be long until we're willing to do violence ourselves. We will become a violent people, and that violence will eventually come back around on us. And that's actually how the passage ends. And a fitting end to this message on Obadiah. Verse 15, the day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. And your deeds will return upon your own head. What goes around comes around. Not in a karma kind of way, but as the Apostle Paul said in Galatians, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A person reaps what they sow. If we continue to sow seeds of division and hatred, we will reap violence, and that will come back to bite us in the end, all of us. Instead of being like the Edomites, let us sow seeds of grace, mercy, compassion, and love to all of our neighbors. Amen.
The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, darkness tries to hide, and trembles at his voice, and trembles at his voice. And how great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will sing how great, and how great is our God. Age to age he stands, and time is in his hands, beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead, three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great, and how great is our God. And how great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will sing how great, and how great is our God. For the name above all names, oh, you're worthy of all praise. And my heart will sing how great our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will sing, how great is our God.